let's welcome our first guest. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Well, I'm delighted to be with you this morning. I just wish I had your nice weather where I am.
Well, I understand that we might have someone listening into the show whose name is Jacob. And I want to welcome your son. And I do want to let all of his friends know that indeed his father is on Internet radio this morning.
Well, if he's listening, he is jumping up and down with excitement. He's 11 years old, and this is a big deal in his world.
Well, it is very cool, yes.
And the cool thing is, even if he isn't listening right now, he'll be able to listen later by downloading it. So, David, let's start out by just having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in Princeton, New Jersey, and that's where I did my undergraduate work. I got my Ph.D. at Harvard in a hybrid of chemistry and computer science. Then I went to work at DuPont, spent 30 years there, retired as their chief computer scientist in 2004. And then I've been teaching at places like Wharton Business School, University of Delaware, and George Washington University School of Law.
Very cool. Well, tell us about your book. The book is has just recently come out. Is that correct?
Came out in October, yes.
Okay, great. And tell us the title and tell us what it's about.
The title is Innovation for Underdogs. The basic principle is we are all capable of being innovative, but the school system and the work environment keep pounding us to conform to the party line and not be innovative. So this book basically teaches you how to unlock your inner innovative skills and how to do so in a politically correct and efficient manner.
So is this for those of us who never knew how to color inside the lines? Or for those who always did color inside the lines and need to escape from that now?
A better way to answer it is, do you remember The Wizard of Oz, how the lion, the Tin Man, and the Straw Man each said they were woefully deficient in a characteristic? And as you watch as they helped Dorothy make her way to the Emerald City, they showed they had those skills. Well, the wizard recognized this and gave them each a placebo and said, now you have a heart, now you have a brain. So you have all these skills right now. All this book does is give you permission to be what you already are.
And the title? Where does that come from? Why Underdogs?
Well, I am a serious dog lover. I have 6 Bichon Frises. And one day I was taking a nap.
Serious.
Yeah, I'm quite serious. I have 6 of them. And one day I was taking a nap on the couch in the kitchen, and all 6 of them jumped up on top of me and fell asleep without waking me. And my son, who was 7 at the time, took out his camera and got a photograph of that and said, Daddy, now I understand what you do. It's innovation under dogs. And the name just stuck.
I think that is just wonderful. David, can you give us some examples of great innovations that perhaps did come from Underdogs?
Well, my favorite is one that I was first introduced to on QVC when I was having insomnia one night. It's a plastic device that enables you to fold shirts so that they don't wrinkle when you're packing the suitcase. This was developed by a woman down in Texas, I don't remember exactly where, who was getting chronic complaints from her teenage daughters about how their shirts were wrinkled. And heaven forbid they should actually help. Well, Mother went out and built this device out of cardboard just to get her kids to stop bugging her. And it's taken off like gangbusters. I think something like 15 million of them have been sold now.
Wow.
Definitely my favorite of someone who was just out of necessity, because innovation comes from only 3 sources: a need, a dissatisfaction, or a curiosity. In this case, it was a dissatisfaction.
Yeah, Chris, you had someone in Dallas who invented one of those hair things.
Yes,
that did the
we
same
did.
kind of thing.
We did. She invented either the scrunchie or one of those things that helps you make a ponytail. Yeah.
And then you always sit back and you watch those folks and you think, now why couldn't I have done that?
Right. Dissatisfaction. And, you always hear the story of the bobby pin, which was so old. There was such a thing, but it didn't have the crinks in it or something. Right. I don't even know if the audience will know what a bobby pin is anymore, or if anybody in the audience has seen one. Right. So what are some other examples?
Well, I'll just give you the latest one. It's hot off the presses. You've been reading undoubtedly about how the airlines are trying desperately to cut the weight of their planes for better fuel efficiency. Well, I just patented a whole new kind of door for luggage compartments on airplanes. You basically cut away most of the frame that's heavy metal and plastic, and you replace it with Kevlar fabric, which is used in bulletproof vests, and it saves almost 10 pounds per door times the number of doors. And two of the major aircraft manufacturers have already said they're going to adopt it because it saves weight, and you can put phosphorescent material in this so that when power goes off, you can see your way to get out of the plane.
Cool.
It's one of these things when you look back, it's obvious. That's right. The thing about innovations. Until you think of them, they're not obvious, but after the fact, gee, I could have done that.
I just had that reaction at Starbucks the other day. Chickie, have you realized you're not going to Starbucks as often as you were because she had a serious addiction? I think we had to get her. Yes. We had to wean her. But there's now the little stir stick that has a little thing on the top that goes through the little sippy hole.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and it stops the little burps so that you don't spill as you're carrying all the, So it's just a simple little green stick with a little top on it, and you're like, why didn't I think of that?
Absolutely.
Well,
David, why is innovation so hard, and how does it differ from invention? Because I know we all think of inventors as being, brainiacs that, sit off in the corner and don't know how to talk to other people around them.
Invention is trying to cajole Mother Nature into telling you things that she's kept secret for a long time. Innovation is nothing more than properly identifying a problem and then going out like a dog searching for a bone and finding new ways to solve that problem. And I'll just give you an example. One of my favorites, having 4 kids, the drive-in line at McDonald's is woefully inefficient. So a little company in Pittsburgh has come up with a neat new device. It's a TV camera, and as you pull into the drive-in line, it looks to see what kind of car you're in, and it counts heads. So if it sees an SUV and multiple heads, it assumes many of those heads are going to be children. So it tells the staff to start preparing kids' meals before you even get to the window to place your order. If it sees a muscle car and a single head, it's probably going to be one of the triple patty cheeseburgers.
Wow.
And what McDonald's has found is it's sped up throughput of the line there by almost 40%.
That's brilliant.
It is, and after the fact, it's obvious.
Well, yeah, and they know so much about their customers. They're taking a very low risk by making those assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're learning more and more as their customers as they make those assumptions and hopefully correct and improve upon that, right?
Yes.
That's funny.
To follow up on your question a little bit, children are the most creative creatures on this planet by far. So I'm going to give you an example, one that I use in my teaching. I ask my students to speed up the game of golf. And they quickly come to the conclusion that the slow step in golf is hunting for lost golf balls. What they don't realize is if your golf is so bad that you lose balls, it's a social event for you, not a competitive sport. The golf ball manufacturers are thrilled that you lose golf balls because they get to sell more. And the country clubs are happy because you play slower and there's less wear and tear on the course. I gave that question to my son and his friends when they were about 6 or 7. And they thought for no more than 1 minute, and my son said, "Daddy, that's easy. Girl dogs smell different than boy dogs. So if you take whatever it is that makes a girl dog smell the way she does and spray it on the golf balls, then bring a boy dog with you and go to play golf because his nose is more sensitive than yours. He'll find the golf ball by smell." I have never had one of my graduate students or any of the adults who I've taught come up with an idea anywhere close to that innovative.
So is your book aimed at children?
About a third of the book is aimed at children. There's a whole chapter on innovations that children have come up with. And then there's a bunch of chapters on how teachers and parents can help children be more innovative. And sometimes it involves their being innovative in how they work with their children. So there's a little behavior modification in there. And then there's a bunch of chapters for adults on once you've come up with the idea and figured out a reasonable solution, how to actually take it to market and make some money with it.
I like the money part.
Very nice. So everything's all in one package. It's not just about how to get innovative or how to think creatively. It takes you not step by step maybe, but just through the whole conceptual process.
Yes, because in the world that we're in now, even children can start successful businesses. And there's a section of one of the chapters on a little boy who was having trouble remembering which was his left foot and which was his right foot. And he came up with the idea of making stickers that he put inside the shoes to specify which is left and which is right.
His name is Chris Barrett, and he was actually on my show last Tuesday.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Amazing young man.
Yeah, he did it when he was 6, and then he went on. He was the first student to ever get a corporate sponsorship for his freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
Very
nice
interesting that you mentioned him.
The invention of earmuffs was by a little boy in Massachusetts who loved to play ice hockey, and his grandmother kept saying, "It's too cold, put on this big heavy hat," and he couldn't play hockey while wearing the hat, so he cut some pieces out of one of his grandmother's old fur coats and then put a piece of metal over a headband over top of it to hold it in place over his ears. And that's where earmuffs came from. So children really need to be encouraged that it's okay to be innovative.
So the children have been the ones doing it, but it's only lately, I guess, that we're allowing them to do it themselves.
Until we had the internet, it was hard for children to research solutions. A study from the University of Michigan showed that when you're holding an issue, the New York Times in your hands, you have as much information right there as the average person during the Middle Ages encountered during their entire lifetime. With the internet now, we're giving children access to huge libraries of information and great ways to research it. So when they get an idea, they can take it many steps further as they explore it than my generation could.
Absolutely. Well, Chicky is very quite the advocate for children and for getting children involved in all sorts of ways into our lives, and I think she must be very excited about hearing your interest in that and the fact that you pulled that into this book.
Well, and absolutely, and my frustration with the school system is the the fascination with the the old school thoughts of reading and writing and arithmetic, and if you are getting kids to memorize things, that means they're learning, and I don't see much focus on innovation in the school where my kids attend, and they're in 2nd and 5th grade, and I would hope that this is the time that you could actually tap into that. And yesterday, one of my friends was over, and she is creating what she is hoping to be the next Looney Tunes, the next, cartoon whole, not just TV shows, but characters, etc. And my son had some of his friends over, and she said, well, what would you guys see happening with these raindrop characters? And her show is all about weather, and she was wanting to know whether that was going to be boring for second graders. And they gave her some great ideas. And I said, we ought to just pull them all into a conference room and film them because they love that, and just have them tell us their ideas. So, David, have you ever done that, gotten a bunch of kids in a room and just seen what comes out?
Oh, absolutely. More than half of my teaching is at the elementary school level.
Wow.
Because,
and is that volunteering, David?
Yeah, entirely volunteering. It's gotten to the point now, one of the better private schools here in Wilmington, the director of the school has bought copies of the book for every student, for every teacher, and it's being used in every classroom now. And I just came back from a lecture tour in India, and one of the universities there, Rai University, just ordered 20,000 copies of the book to give to every student and every faculty member. India has made a firm national commitment to try to use innovation, starting in the schools, to overtake the United States as a major world power. So they're starting right down at the elementary school level. But I'll give you an example of how children think so differently than as an adult I would have thought of. I asked one class of sixth graders, where does the phrase happy as a clam come from? Because the only time I get up close and personal with a clam, I'm about to eat him. And why he thinks that's cool, I don't know. But this little boy looked at me and he said, well, that's easy. Clams spend their entire life fastened to a pier. They don't have any flexibility in their diet. The only thing they can eat is what comes washing by, and they filter down. So they're bored. To them, the ultimate achievement of life is to be incorporated into a fabulous recipe and eaten by someone else. So the clam is smiling because it knows you're going to mix it with garlic sauce and probably put it over pasta and eat it.
That's great.
I was totally amazed at his thought patterns.
I love it.
Very, very interesting.
Definitely a boy from the Northeast, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure my kids would know much about clams.
You raised an interesting point about coffee, because the world right now produces over 7 million tons a year of spent coffee grounds as a result of all the instant coffee that we drink, or that gets brewed at places like Starbucks. And there's a professor in Australia who was trying to figure out something useful to do with coffee grounds, and found that if you mix coffee grounds and animal manure, preferably cow, and you slowly bake that with straw, you wind up with a pot which does a fabulous job of filtering pathogens and pollutants out of water. So he's traveling around Africa now, teaching the poorest of the poor how they can make these pots and clean up their water so they're not ravaged by disease like cholera.
That is amazing.
There's 7 million tons a year of spent coffee grounds.
How awesome is that?
Just
if one
know.
company like a Starbucks contributed their coffee grounds, that would be so amazing.
Well, I believe Nestle's provided him with all the coffee grounds for his testing. They were using it as a boiler fuel to save on energy costs, but have felt this is a much higher purpose for the stuff.
So, David, when you were little, were you an innovator? Were you an inventor? Were you trying to solve problems as a child?
Yes, I was. I have an incredible debt to my father. He was a physicist at RCA, living in Princeton, but because he was a physicist, we had family friends like Albert Einstein. So Einstein even came over to the house periodically, and I would sit in his lap. I was fascinated by his hairline and his accent. And one day I fell off his lap and landed on my head, and my mother thinks that if I did have any brain damage, it's probably healed by now. But she has somewhere in her folders a photograph of me playing the sandbox with Albert Einstein.
Oh, that's priceless.
I was very fortunate to have people who were acting as mentors on thinking about the world and science, but at the same time reminding my parents, he's got to be a kid too. We have to achieve that balance. If we don't, we're really shortchanging our kids and stifling their ability to be innovative and creative.
So, David, it sounds like, I mean, you were in a family, obviously, that had a scientific bent. So it sounds like it really is, innovation is something that's innate as opposed to something that you teach people. Now, I believe that you said that your book actually takes the opposite position, that it can be taught.
Oh, it absolutely can. I've spent a fair amount of time in Africa and have studied a number of the more aged civilizations. Let's take the giant pyramid at Cheops in Egypt that was constructed almost 4,500 years ago. The base of it is 5.5 acres, and it's absolutely flat to within approximately 1/100th of an inch. They didn't have string then. They didn't have transits and levels. So the question is, how did they do it? Archaeologists have figured that one out. What the Egyptians did was they dug trenches all across the foundation and ran water into it and let gravity flatten the water, even it out, and then they chiseled away the stone to make it flat. So here's an example of innovations that were done before there was even written language. Or if you go down to the Kalahari Desert, where you've got natives who are practically living under Stone Age conditions, it's amazing how many things they can come up with to enable themselves to function and prosper.
What is the most bizarre innovation story that you can tell us, perhaps that came out of your teaching at the college level, or, innovation that you saw that was totally unexpected?
Okay, you may regret this one, but I asked one of my classes to come up with innovations in sex. The reason being that sex had been around for a long time, and kids in their early 20s have been increasingly adventuresome as time goes on. And I immediately got the normal guffaws and snickers and red faces, been there, done that. Well, one student looked at me, and he gave me a smile and says, "I'll see you next week." He went out, and he bought 2 of those cardiovascular monitoring systems that you use for exercise, with a strap across the chest and a wrist receiver which is tuned to that particular chest strap. And he swapped the receivers. So your receiver was reading your partner's heart rate and blood pressure, and they were reading yours. So he sold these as a pair as sex toys, Christmas time, entitled No Faking. And he sold something like $50,000 worth of them on several campuses in Philadelphia that year.
That would be innovation.
It was.
Oh, but that's brilliant.
It is. It's amazing how perceptive these kids are.
So definitely out of a need, a dissatisfaction, or a curiosity. Well, David, in the couple of minutes that we have left, what happens when you give people permission to innovate? Chris had mentioned earlier that, we really haven't done that with our kids. So what happens when the average person, the underdog, is given permission?
They're scared because it's a whole new world for them. What you have to do is, in addition to giving them permission, give them encouragement and a reward structure. Because the world, as people are used to growing up in, you either succeed or you fail. There's really a third state, and that is you don't succeed. What we have to do is get, especially the children, to understand that sometimes there are things beyond your control which keep you from succeeding, but that doesn't mean your idea was bad or that anything you did was inadequate. So if you can get them to where they realize that they didn't fail, but they just didn't succeed, then they build the self-confidence and the self-esteem, and then they just go on like gangbusters. That first hurdle is the hard one, though. Because our schools have brainwashed the children to believe that the only right answer is the one the teacher is looking for on the test. Your answer may be every bit as good, but you still get it wrong, and your grade goes down, and you can fail a test even though every one of your answers is really correct.
Right.
Yes. And that concept of there's not just win or lose, right? That impacts much more than just innovation.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. If you look at the business work environment, you've got the same kind of situation. I run an exercise in my teaching where I ask an unsuspecting student to talk about an idea that they had that their employer did not adopt. And then with no warning, I turn the classroom into a courtroom, and they're charged with subversion in the workplace, using company resources and time to work on something they were not told to do. I pick another student to become prosecuting attorney, one to become defense attorney, one to become HR manager, and we run a full-blown courtroom at that point, and they've had no time to prepare, which is part of why the exercise works. And they see a dynamic in the communication, the interactions, but in the absence of the hierarchy you normally see in business, and it really opens people's eyes to how you can function in an organization as opposed to how you normally do.
Well, very cool. David, I really appreciate your time this morning. I can't wait to read your book, and I do hope that your son Jacob gets a chance to download this later on today and share it with all of his friends. You have a terrific day, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Wonderful.
David, thank you
so much for having me on. I really appreciate the chance to tell a bit of my story.